All right, everyone. The defenders of democracy don't appear to be really fans of democracy at the moment. You see, the will of the people in both the popular vote and the electoral vote, by the way, was to re-elect Donald Trump. Only the second time in U.S. history that you've had two non-consecutive terms held by a president. The first, of course, Grover Cleveland. Glover? I don't think so. It hasn't happened for 100 years. There's a reason for that. And it was mainly because the current administration fucking sucks. The economy fucking sucks. It's still going to suck for some time. It'll take Trump a while to make up for lost time. The border sucks. Our foreign diplomacy fucking sucks. Everything about the administration. I mean, Kamala Harris has disappeared for a reason. She's going to basically disappear, I think, into the woodwork. I don't know that she's actually seriously going to run for the governor of California. But as I talked about yesterday, inexplicably, for some reason, about 40% of Democrats want her to run again. That's a terrible idea. She will lose, by the way. I'll just make my prediction on day one. But I think the cringiest thing that we're seeing is the return of this bullshit, cringe-ass rhetoric about the Rebel Alliance, the hashtag resistance, pink pussy hats, and things like that. We're going to show Trump who's boss by having lost and then complaining about it endlessly for years at a time. They're going to be getting people like Raskin and Pelosi to try to harass as much as possible, but they don't really have the legislative majority, especially in the Senate, that they need to really obstruct at this point. Effectively, I hate to tell the liberals two things. This goes out to the Democratic partisans and the liberals in general. Number one, if you are successful in obstructing Trump's agenda in any way, it will require Republicans to have piled on board with you. Now, I know that as long as a Republican worships at the TDS altar like Liz Cheney, they get a hall pass, basically, from the liberals, but you literally sold your soul to the devil. The worst people in the Republican Party, the warmongers and chicken hawks and shit like that, are the ones you're going to have to resort to, number one, to obstruct in any meaningful manner. That's number one. Number two, you've tried this strategy before. It looks cringe as fuck. It does not work, and actually turns people off, I think, towards more liberal policies. I say this, when I tell them this, they just call me a Nazi, and they ignore me. When I try to give constructive criticism, hey, this tactic is not working, the reason that I'm doing that is because I'm not a Republican, I'm not a conservative. If Trump does something shitty, I want him to be obstructed, although generally speaking he does a good job. I voted for him. I'm very glad that he won over Kamala Harris, but that does not make me a Republican. It doesn't make me right-wing, because I'm not, and it doesn't make me a fucking Nazi. When your response to any form of criticism, therefore, is to call somebody that, it's not really helpful now, is it? This is why the Democrats lost so catastrophically. Supposedly, they were running against the reincarnated, retarded version of Adolf Hitler. They managed to lose the popular vote. All of a sudden, democracy is this terrible thing. Which is funny, because for several years they were talking about defending it. Now it seems like they don't want democracy anymore. The Rebel Alliance stuff, though, the Star Wars references, the primal scream therapy, things like that, I don't think that they quite understand. If you're in a left-wing echo chamber, or a right-wing echo chamber, then that kind of behavior is not admonished against. It's considered acceptable. When it gets on TV, when videos are spreading about somebody who's part of your political cohort online, it's usually for all of the wrong reasons. You get relatively less soaring rhetoric like, Obama at the keynote speech or something like that. You get relatively less of that and relatively more of cringe. You get relatively more things that are being spread online by people that you do not agree with, not without good reason, politically speaking. Right now, like, you could make hours and hours and hours of footage of all of the salt from liberals melting down over the results of the 2024 election. It wouldn't be difficult. You could make a whole channel on the subject. And a lot of it is, well, now I'm Luke Skywalker. And Trump, of course, he's Darth Vader, or maybe Palpatine, or something like that. Although I think that Dick Cheney, ironically, would fill that role more perfectly. Considering who his daughter is and who she's friends with, that's extremely ironic to me. If you're going to make a Star Wars reference at all, please make it a little bit less cringe and a little bit more actually applicable. But this is not being done. And so what you're going to end up with is Donald Trump running roughshod over everything. The hope is that he uses that power for good. Thankfully, I think that he can be generally trusted to do that, but that doesn't always mean that everything that he does is going to be perfect. Yeah, a war could start. I mean, we're in several already, so it doesn't really matter, I suppose. There could be a diplomatic snafu. There could easily be an economic downturn. What you need is to actually have accountability there, but there's no attempt to actually create the accountability. Because the liberals are so far out to lunch that they're sitting there pissing themselves and whining and crying and thrashing around on the floor, and that's not really going to create accountability. You see, you've tried this before. You tried this after the 2016 election, and people were laughing at you. I'm just waiting for the next Chaz Garden at this point. Oh my God, I laughed my ass off to the point where I was literally crying. When people were sending me those images, this is probably the ultimate symbol of the left-wing meltdown, the Chaz Garden. Antifa attempting to farm. Yeah, it worked really well. In the Soviet Union, at the very least, you would have been taught how to grow turnips. You would have had something to eat. I don't think that all of that arugula really went that far. Apparently, they maintained it for several years thereafter, actually. A couple of itinerants there were still farming the fucking park, and then they eventually got evicted from the property. There is no rebel alliance against Trump. You're not the rebels at all. You'd be the Sith. I don't think that they fully understand this. That's about all. Peace out.